You know, several of my best friends support the wrong political party. And I spend time wondering how they make such crazy political decisions. But you know, knowing my best friends like I do, I know they think that I support the wrong political party, and they spend time wondering just why I make the crazy political decisions that I do. First president that I remember was President Eisenhower. I saw him once as a child in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. President Eisenhower was a Republican. He was followed by President Kennedy, who was a Democrat, who was followed by President Johnson, who was a Democrat, who was followed by President Nixon, who was a Republican, who was followed by President Ford, who was also a Republican, who was followed by Jimmy Carter, who was a Democrat, who was followed by Ronald Reagan, who was a Republican, who was followed by President Bush, who was a Republican, who was followed by President Clinton, who was a Democrat, who was followed by another President Bush, who was a Republican, who was followed by President Obama, who was a Democrat, who was followed by President Trump, who is a Republican. Does anything come to mind in all of that? Kind of like a big ping pong game, back and forth, back and forth. But you know, no matter what party was in power over the last 60 some odd years in my recollection of presidents, the Lord blessed my life. As a child, I grew up happy. I got a good education. I got a job that helped me provide for my family all my life. Kitty and I got to raise 3 kids and had the time of our life doing it. And now we get to enjoy grandchildren along with our children. This past weekend is one of the best weekends of my life. I got to help my son Brian and my grandson Colt build a deck. And it was just great watching Colt's desire to learn and his desire to build. And by Sunday afternoon, I was relinquished to just supplying boards for Colt to screw down on the deck. The Lord has really blessed my life in spite of who was in the White House. I don't want you to think I'm sloughing things off, because in 1975, I took an oath of office to defend the United States as an officer in the United States Army. And I still hold that oath important today. And I support the candidate that I think is best for this country. And I vote for him, just like all of you do. But I want to read something to you in 1 John. 1 John chapter 2, beginning in verse 24. John writes, "See that what you have heard from the beginning remains in you. If it does, you also will remain in the Son and in the Father. And this is what he promised us, eternal life." Now, if I was to ask you a question, what is the message that you've heard from the beginning? You all would give me good answers, I'm sure. But John doesn't leave us hanging. In chapter 3, just a few verses over, John goes out and says, "This is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another." Life is not about politics. Life is about loving one another. Be safe. Stay well out there.